just to finish off this section, we're going to look at the song This Is America, and you should put this in your RLD notes. So there's the instructions right here. You probably should watch the music video, but also read the lyrics. Here's the free write. Read the lyrics, watch the video, and focus more on the lyrics when you're writing about it. But if there's something in the music video that actually weighs in on something in the lyrics, you can write about that. So yeah, I'd say just spend like 5-15 minutes on that. So in the song, This Is America, what is Donald Glover saying in the lyrics?
Okay, so for me, in one part, well, it's the end basically. It says, "You just a big dog. No, probably ain't life to a dog for a big dog." That's referring to how some people call themselves like, "Oh, I'm the big dog," or something like that. And he's saying like that's not the proper life for people who call themselves like that.
So yeah, big dog. Do you guys know the term double entendre? Two possible meanings there. It could be, yeah, you're a big dog, talking about, masculinity or authority in a way, like by power, you're a powerful person. But then what else can a dog, especially in reference to, what is he talking about? Being kenneled, being caged?
Yeah, that part I didn't really knew how to like process it or to define it. So I didn't touch a lot on that part.
Yeah, well, let's think about it a little bit. So yeah, he ends the song with, "You just a black man in this world. You just a barcode, eh? You just a black man in this world driving expensive foreigns, eh? You just a big dog. Yeah, I kenneled him in the backyard. No proper life to a dog for a big dog." That's interesting. So in the backyard, or proper life, just think about the metaphor for the dog, like you were talking about a little bit. Does anyone live in an apartment? And can they imagine having one of those really big dogs in that apartment? Like how difficult it would be to have a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler or a Bernese Mountain Dog. Yeah, it would be difficult to have that kind of dog in an apartment without a yard or anything like that. Or maybe you have a nice house and you don't want the dog to wreck your house. So you keep them in the backyard. You keep them in an area where you can still use them or work them. Big dogs are typically, they were bred for working. We don't really do that with dogs anymore. I mean, there's police dogs, and those dogs used to be used for shepherding or for guarding or for a lot of different work. And so when they don't get worked, they rip up your shoes and they trash your house because they need something to do, and you're not running them necessarily, and you're not giving them a good life. Well, I mean, there's nothing left to do, I guess, with that kind of dog. If you can't work them, anymore, you just got to keep them kenneled up in the backyard because you don't want them to break your stuff. That's if you try to now take that metaphor and apply it back to a black man in our society, that's interesting. Also, is there anything related with that to driving expensive cars? Driving expensive foreigns? Did anyone notice in the video also? Let's look at the video really quick. Did you guys see the expensive foreigns? I mean, these aren't expensive foreigns, are they?
No, they are old cars.
Did you see anything like in the song, things that would refer back to that kind of stuff? How about here? I'm so fitted, I'm on Gucci, I'm so pretty. Or money, we just want the money and party, things like that. Yeah, so what I'm wondering is, if he talks about being locked up in a kennel in a backyard, what does this kennel look like? Is this a literal kennel? He's not a literal dog. So what could he be referring to the kennel as being?
Jail?
Could be. It could be jail. The end kennel could be jail. But is there anything that cages you metaphorically also along the way?
Oh, like we were saying, like ghettos or the part where you live, like sometimes you're just confined to live in that place.
Okay, that does work too. you know what ghettos were originally? So this goes back, we really don't have to go too far into this, but just to let you guys know, the concept of a ghetto was a place to keep people at night. So like the idea we just talked about sundown towns, how people weren't allowed to stay in a certain place when nightfall came. So there was this issue, the concept of lending money in the Christian world was looked down upon. We're talking like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So first of all, there was anti-Semitism, and so Jews were not allowed in certain countries, like England. No Jews were allowed until they realized that they needed, they called it usury back then, which is loaning money, like the banking systems. So for Christians, you're not supposed to loan money. It's looked down upon because if someone asks you for something, you're supposed to give it to them. But because people are greedy bastards, instead of giving freely, they would just say they didn't have anything. And so there was this huge issue with people not being able to pay for things. And they realized there was this area where they needed usury, they needed banking. And the one people group who found a justification for it, the Old Testament doesn't have a justification for loaning money. It says don't loan money at all, but then there's another verse that says don't loan money to your countrymen. And so they ignored the other verse and they just said, well, that means we can loan money to people who aren't our countrymen, to people who aren't our people. And so they found a loophole in their religion where they made it so they could loan money, and then they had a way in because Jews were hated for a very long time. Many times throughout the centuries, it wasn't just the Holocaust or Egypt with the slavery. They were ostracized and kicked out of areas a lot. And so in England, that no Jews were allowed for a long time until they realized that they needed banking. And so Jews were allowed in, but they would keep them in areas called ghettos, where they would literally lock the gate at night so that the Jews couldn't get out and like do dangerous Jew things. If you look at some of the plays from back in the day, their forms of entertainment, that was all they had. If you look at some of them, like The Jew of Malta or Merchant of Venice, which was Shakespeare, you will see that Jews were not looked fondly on. They were always looked on like villains, like someone who would come into your house and eat your babies at night, like a witch or something weird like that. I know this doesn't sound like it applies, but it totally does. Now think about how we have ghettos now, and even just how we've labeled them as ghettos. It's almost like a place to keep the people that you don't want to damage your way of life or possibly endanger it. So we have, yeah, you're right, Jose.
Even the Jew thing that you mentioned, it's also segregating, like racism and all those things. And one would associate ghettos with only people of Black ethnicities. But in reality, no, like it was actually for Jewish people.
They did that in other countries too, like the whole Merchant of Venice that actually is taking place in Venice, which is Italy, because Jews were still not allowed in England at that point when Shakespeare was writing that. So Italy and all kinds of other places had these things going on, but you see the same tactics being used through the centuries to keep people in a place. And then when they are able to elevate their position, like when banking systems were actually working for them. I mean, what kind of things do you think you have to even do to come up, to be able to raise your status economically? It seems like you have to be a pretty shrewd businessman. And instead of being like, well, obviously you would have to do that, they ended up getting resented for it. That happens anywhere too, with any people group who struggles and works as hard as they can, fingers to the bone, just to be able to have a life like everyone else. They end up getting ridiculed. Hey, you're taking our jobs. So I mow my own lawn. I keep my own yard up. It does not look pretty. I mow weeds, or I use a weed whacker on them. It is ugly. I have the ugliest yard in my neighborhood. But a lot of people who complain about other people taking their jobs, I think it's interesting when they say that. It makes me wonder first, would you do that job that you think someone else is taking from you? Would you really do that job? Or do you just want an excuse for why you don't have a job?
Yeah, that part of how people like get angry over like immigrants or whatever taking their jobs, that's like a big thing. How like you're complaining about it, but you're not even, you would never do that. You wouldn't want to do the labor. Like you wouldn't want to be like underpaid, or you wouldn't, yeah, you just wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's weird. Because I saw, I think it was yesterday, I forgot where, that there was like a, like kind of like a protest. There was like construction workers, I don't know where, and people were like yelling at them that they're taking their jobs, and I just don't understand like what they think in their head. Like it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's still going on, right? That wasn't just it comes in waves. You think that, oh, we haven't had that for years, but in reality, no, it happens often. It's still happening. And depending on where you live in the country, uh, I mean, it could be an everyday occurrence. There's racism, there's all kinds of inequalities happening all around us, uh, in other places where you may think because of where you live, that doesn't happen anymore. But in reality, like even the concept of slavery, even though slavery was abolished like in the 1800s, there were still people living like slaves in the South. There's documentaries all on it where people were literally living exactly like slavery in the 60s. Like, how is that a thing? And yet it really took place. There's people like interviews with them because TV was even around at that point, and they don't even realize because they were trapped in this cultural bubble where they didn't realize what was going on with the rest of the country so much. We like to think that information is disseminated equally, and now it may be the case that you can find things if you know where to look, especially with the internet. But back in the day when everything was just word of mouth and you could choose to share that information or not, and some people just never learned to read even, things like that. There's a lot of crippling factors that made it so that information was not disseminated equally. That's also another way of keeping people under control, is a lack of knowledge and limiting knowledge. So it goes both ways. It's not just that you're complaining about them taking your job. It's also the boss, the corporation, whatever company it is, that is choosing to hire these people who are, whatever their circumstances are, they are willing to work for these wages that anyone else wouldn't be willing to work for. And so it comes down to the company also. Like the company is guilty because they are specifically targeting people who are at such a desperate state that a company knows that they can get people to do hard labor for extremely low, unfair wages in dangerous situations. Like if you've seen like the meat industry and all kinds of issues there with how every once in a while they get in trouble for it instead of being consistently regulated on health codes and even just working environments, OSHA and everything like that. Why aren't they constantly being kept in check? It's interesting. It's almost like not even just the corporations or the companies themselves, but also on top of that, government agencies are turning a blind eye to situations.
I feel that they know that they could get away with it because people are desperate for jobs. So it's like they're going to take what they can get.
So this is an interesting element to look at with that. If you take it further up, if you look at how all of that plays out, corporations and the government agencies turning a blind eye or whatever they're doing and not getting in trouble for, or if they even get in trouble, it's like a slap on the wrist. Like a lot of polluting that happens in industry, the polluting is worth it for them because even if they get in trouble for the polluting, the penalty that they get from the government is not enough for them to stop polluting. It's not enough for them to change the way that they do business. And so they'll keep polluting and they'll keep paying the penalties because they're still making money. They're still able to get away with everything. So that becomes problematic. And you see like on a policy level where things need to change. But obviously with this essay, you're just focusing on what is happening and making an argument of fact about that, not how it's wrong or how it needs to change, the wrong will be implied if you were just going into it. Like you say, this is a problem. And then that can still be an argument of fact, because then you can point out how it's a problem without going into the moral component of it. It's just proving it. And then that just kind of sets groundwork for you if you want to take that further in the fourth essay. So a lot of stuff going on there, because that's one way to cage people, to keep people in a cage, like we're seeing here in the song. In the song, what do you see that may be alluding to another cage that's going on here? Are there any other cages in society that people get trapped by?
Like the gun violence. He says, like, this is America, there's guns in my area, and then how he has to carry one with him.
Okay. Why does
But
he have to
then, like,
do that, do you think?
I feel like for safety and just because it's going on. But then he kind of makes it seem like he's just saying, like, okay, like, this is how it is, and this is what I have to do.
Mm-hmm. Guns in my area, I got the strap, I got to carry them. Well, yeah, let's look at that really quick. Guns in my area, I got the strap, I got to carry them.
And, like, there's school kids in the background.
Yeah.
Kind of weird. Like the gun violence with that too.
Uh-huh. Well, let's think about this. So if there's guns in your area, it only makes sense that you would also need a gun for protection. So I've got the strap. You're already saying that you have a gun and it's related to you are strapped, right? You carry the gun. If he says, I've got the strap, I've got to carry him, doesn't that kind of sound redundant? Of course, you've got to carry him. Well, is there anything else that he could be referring to carrying?
Like protecting his, I don't want to say society, but like.
No, look at the kids in the background. Who's he got to protect?
Yeah, he has to fight. He has to be the one, like he has to be a protector.
Yeah, at the very least, that's the mentality or the idea that starts you in that direction. That's one of the ideas, or one of the even excuses that you need to justify carrying a gun. Now, does you carrying a gun actually help anything? Typically, in that scenario, if you live in the ghetto and you carry a gun, are you going to be protecting anyone?
No.
There's this mentality or ideology that comes in. You live in a dangerous area. You see bad things happen. There's people over here, your own people. There's tribalism that ends up happening. Remember 21 Savage, the whole Bloods and Crips idea? Now, he says he hangs out with Crips too, but the idea that there are gangs, there are definitely gangs. Near me, there's several gangs, and they are at odds. There's this idea that you have to protect your people, your group, from certain things. And you see all this stuff going on in the background. Meanwhile, there's, like 5 or 6 kids who are dressed nicely. They go to a school, right? It's almost like the black kids that do get the education. They're in the front grounds, right? They're the kids that see, look at what we're doing. Look at how we're fixing society, or we're helping the minorities. They're almost like the token kids who see the system works. We've got these 6 kids to show you in the foreground to let you know that we're working on making the system better. Meanwhile, there's all this junk going on in the background, and it just keeps escalating and getting worse. Meanwhile, the kids are happy, they're smiling, they're dancing for you. They're letting you know that they're thankful that society is working for them. Or maybe they could represent just a bunch of different stuff. But no matter what, this is what society wants to see. They want to see you like this. And if you don't look like this, with your shirt tucked in and a belt on, if you can't put on the image of fitting in like an upper class white person, then they're going to treat you differently. It's almost like you have to become a white person, talk like a white person. What is he concerned with? So the gun, I got to carry him. This leads to guerrilla and get the bag or the pad. Goes into you become a drug dealer, to get what you want, right? Once you get all this stuff, then you're able to be Gucci and fitted and pretty and stuff like that. Do you see how the trajectory goes? And then eventually, becoming a drug dealer gets dangerous, and then you get very few avenues for success. You can either be a rapper, a ball player, or a drug dealer. Are those really the only ways that you can, if those are the only career paths for you in life, or at least that's what everyone tells you are the only career paths for you in life, that sounds pretty bleak. It sounds like the lottery or extreme danger. That could be some of it.
The part that says
Uh-huh.
dance and shake the frame, is that like the frame, like they're trapped or something like that?
So a frame is really interesting. You take pictures, and whatever is in the picture is in the frame. Have you ever gone on a hike in nature and you took a picture, or you tried to take a picture and you made sure that people weren't in the picture, or maybe a telephone pole or telephone wires weren't in the picture because you wanted it to look a certain way? You wanted it to actually look like nature?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you take a picture and you frame it, you're trying to present this is reality, or this is an image I want you to see. But the fact is that that's not reality. Reality is not just what is in that frame, but what is outside of that frame. The frame is what you want to look at. The frame is what people want to see. But there's all this other stuff that you're trying to keep out of the frame, or someone is trying to keep out of the frame because they don't want reality. They want something else. They want that other thing to be reality. They want to live in a delusion. And so, yes, this all, I know I'm just talking about taking pictures, but you know that this kind of like thought subliminally, right, deep in your subconscious, it's kind of, that's how pictures work. Pictures are always a lie. They're not all of reality. They're not the real thing that's going on. You took a picture and you cut out your laundry basket, or the trash on the ground, or whatever you didn't want in the shot because it's ugly and you don't want people to know that you're messy, or that whatever else is going on. So there's reasons for that stuff, but the whole concept here of shaking the frame, it's budging it, right? Like you are shaking the frame so that you can possibly see what's outside of the frame, to see reality. What do you think, Jose?
Now I can see it better, because the frame I was thinking more not like a picture frame, or just like a frame in general. So like something that it's around another thing. So I was thinking maybe dance and like shake that thing that it's around you. But now that you mention it, more sense.
No, what you said totally works too, though. Like it's still symbolism of something that's kind of got you trapped. You're trapped in this frame a little bit. This is how you have to act. But if you can budget a little bit, maybe you can expand the frame, or you can change whatever is going on, I guess. I do want to touch on one last thing, the idea of consumerism here, or success having to do with commodities. So in the music video, you see people getting shot, you see police, and that's all the stuff that social commentaries really talk about with this, but they don't look at how he's also pointing to something else. People using their phone to take pictures of themselves. He says, this is Selly, that's a tool. Is it a tool so that you can make people see what you want them to see, which is you looking pretty or Gucci or fitted? If you are trapped in this idea that success and happiness is based off of material goods, then you will always stay trapped in this cage, this invisible cage, which is spend your money on these things so that you never raise yourself economically out of that situation. So long as you can look like you're successful, that you can look like you're not in that situation, then that's just as good. And then we can keep you in that place. So I know that sounds like diabolical and sinister, and kind of like there's a conspiracy theory floating around there. Like, who's they? Who's we, right? But you can't say that lower income people aren't trapped in the idea of they see what's on Instagram, they see what people are doing on TV, what success looks like, and their first inclination, or what ends up happening, is they end up spending their money in a way that gets some of those things, or at least the image of those things, but not the real thing itself. And so they end up getting trapped in that, and then you stay on that, remember the treadmill of consumption? where you're not going anywhere. You think you're going somewhere, but you're not. And so the idea of keeping people busy with that and looking at themselves being pretty, this is a tool. Turn the camera around and take video footage when you see injustice. When you see something going on that shouldn't go on, this is a tool. You can use this to turn it around. And so instead of looking at the kids dancing, look at all the shit that's going on in the background where things are burning and people are dying in the streets. And there's racial injustice. There's horrible things happening. Turn the camera around and use it, right? Like if everyone is able to see what's going on and understand what's going on, maybe we can do something about it, is possibly what he's talking about here. What do you guys think? Do you see it? Do you see it in the lyrics at all?
Yeah.
What did you guys think about that line? America, I just checked my followers or my following list, and you owe me. Who did that sound like to you? I kind of think it sounded like Kanye.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It does,
crazy
right?
for a time.
Like this, the idea of fame and the image, right? Like getting people to like you or think you're great. It's a trap where you care so much more about looks rather than actually being able to get those things. What are the things that we're supposed to have? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Or property. It was supposed to be property, but then they changed it because happiness is something that you can't really define, and it's easy. No one needs to hand it to you, right? You can't be obligated to give someone happiness. If property was the thing, then people would be obligated, or the government would be obligated to make sure everyone had property, and that's not a thing that they would want to do. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, and you could take that in so many directions for an argument of fact essay. You could go into, I mean, how many things did we just talk about just in this one song that could be an entire claim of fact argument? And same thing with the other reading. So there's all kinds of stuff that you could go off on with race. You know, you could go into a defund the police or anything like that kind of argument in your fourth essay. But yeah, that's not something you would cover here. There's plenty of other things though that you could cover just to prove something that is wrong or still happening or whatever, and then imply that it shouldn't be without even saying it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, cool.